Thank you, and welcome from my side. So, actually, let's go a little bit back into the past. 2017, UI5con Frankfurt. Who was there? Yeah, a few people are there, have been there. Well, so, see that. So back then, I was also talking about functional reactive programming and how it works together with UI5. And yeah, I have no luck today. So not only in the keynote I have to switch, let's hope my HDMI port is not broken here as well. So back then I was talking about functional reactive programming with UI5 and how you can do that with RxJS. So you had to integrate an additional library to work with that. So what is reactive programming? So you could talk hours about that. Whole university lectures go around that. So let's try to summarize it in 3 points. So first of all, in contrast to imperative programming, you work more with this Hollywood principle. Don't call us, we call you. You get called in your code base, so you have this inversion of control. Secondly, you're working event-driven. So you have events, and you're working with them. And the third part is you take these events and take them as an event stream, and you compose these event streams declaratively. So we could, wir können auch, ich habe es aufgetappt drauf. So if you give me a few. Sind die hier im Internet? Die anderen? Sind die im Internet?
Du kannst, ist das so etwas wichtig?
Nee, aber ich habe es,
Kontakt haben.
Now it's working, the cable? Okay, well, let's see. No. Can we switch to this PC? Have everything always twice, right? Once on your local machine and once over here. Is there a presenter for this one as well? Let's take this one. Okay. Okay, actually we did that on purpose to show you the event-driven part of a presentation. Right, and like the presentation was flashing in, yeah, it's also with reactive programming that you have events that are flashing into your application and going through. So back then in Frankfurt, I was showing these two samples, how you integrate RxJS and UI5, and that you have here really an event stream. Here in this example, increments and decrement buttons. These are UI5 buttons that you then transform into increment-decrement stream until you combine them into a count stream that's just updating here the sample and also Wikipedia live search. We lost a little bit of time, so let's skip that part and continue. But now we have new features in JavaScript, in the language. So with ES2018, ES6, there came iterators, generators, and the for off loop. With ES2017, there came async await. And with ES2018, there came the combination of both of them, the async iterators and async generators, and the async for off loop. So let's look a little bit what they are all about. So iterators, you might remember back from university, design patterns, Iterator Pattern. And that's now also available in JavaScript. And it's built into things like array and map, these built-in objects. But you can easily have an iterator on your own objects as well. You just have to define this symbol.iterator as a property of your object, which is then a function returning you the iterator. And the iterator has a next function that's then always returning a result object. We see it here with a done and a value property. So, and then whenever you ask the next function, you will get the next chunk of values, yeah, until you sometimes reach the point where you always return done. That's quite tedious to write, isn't it? So therefore, the people came up with a little bit nicer syntax to write iterators. And these are generators. So generators you can easily identify by this little asterisk here. So a function with this asterisk is not returning its direct value, but is returning an iterator. And the iterator itself, when you call next on it, it will evaluate the function until you yield a value. You yield the next value in your for your iterator call instead of using the return statement. When you return that function, or you either explicitly or implicitly, it's like returning done in your iterator. So how can you leverage that in your code? Well, you can do that bare bone. Just access the iterator and then calling next yourself. But there's a simpler way. With the for off loop, the JavaScript, or the browser, the JavaScript engine, takes over this next, and checking are you done for you, and directly giving you the result value here into your value variable instead of you having to access this result value yourself. Okay, that's the basics. Now we have async await, a simpler way to work with promises. So instead of going promise dot then and then having a function on that, we can directly await the result of this async function here. And here in this variable, we don't have the promise, but the value that promise resolves to. So in this example, we'll have here the 5. But how can that work? I mean, we have here asynchronous, potentially asynchronous coding running. How can we have that sequentially now? That's why we have to mark those functions as async functions. And async functions don't return the value. They always wrap them in a promise. So it looks synchronously, but actually it's also returning promises. But now, with the latest JavaScript specification, we can also combine the two. So we can have iterators that are asynchronous. So they have, again, their own symbol to define where they are in your object. And they also have a next function like the synchronous way. But now the next values always resolves these result objects inside a promise. So, okay, maybe not that spectacular, but let's see. So then, of course, to simplify the iterator implementation, we can have a generator for it. You see it again here with the asterisk, and now it's an async generator. And it returns the async iterator, which then, when you call next on it, will return you a promise that then only then resolves when you yield some values. So in this time, we'll asynchronously yield the 42 chunks of data until we finally reach the return of that statement. You can now, of course, also work with these asynchronous iterators directly, accessing it with the property, calling next on it, and then working with the values. But it's also quite cumbersome, and in this case, I'm only getting one value. Doing looping over promises is always a little bit tricky, you know. So therefore, there's also the options of an async for off loop. And actually, it's the same as with the synchronous coding, just as we now have the for await, and then the same thing as before. So our iterator on the right-hand side and the result value. It's now also not a promise, but the resolved value of that promise. So, well, how to deal with that now? Why so much theory? Well, let's see what's the change now to these two example projects when we build them now with the latest JavaScript features and, by the way, also UI5 Web Components. So when we look now here into this asynchronous data flow example, we again have an increment and a decrement button. And what we're now doing is I have written a little utility function that's just an async generator attaching to the click event of this web component, and it's always yielding these events. And this asynchronous iterator that we get here, we can pass into another async generator function that just takes the event and converts it into an increment or a decrement iterator right here, which will then can pass again, for example, here into this model generator function, which uses here a little merge utility that I wrote, which is again an async generator, which is just taking the values now from both of these streams. And suddenly we have the +1 and -1s here in our action value, and we can sum them easily up with our count value and yield these values. So that means now we can make use also of this for await off loop down here to get the current values of our model to update then our values. So this time we're updating the input web components value attribute when it's going through the loop. So we don't need an additional library. We can leverage what's already available in Firefox and Chrome in their latest versions. And similarly, this Wikipedia live search, that's even a little bit simpler. So we again have this utility and taking now the input events from the input field. So let's have a look for jar. And we only want to trigger the Wikipedia API when we have at least 3 characters, when it's different from the last one, and not too often. So let's trigger the third one. And we have here JavaScript. And what we then just do, based on this one iterator, we have this getEntries method that's just using simple JavaScript operations, just if statements, instead of using RxJS library-specific functionality to go through these values of the observable. So our first check, do we have a value at all? Is it coming too soon? Well, then just continue. So regular continue statement you have also from normal for loops. Has it changed since its last call? So, well, if it's the same, then just continue. Has it at least 3 characters? If not, just continue. So remember last value, trigger our promise-based search Wikipedia function, and yielding the result values. Then we have here in our M entries, which we can then use to update the Web Components suggest API to bring up this value. So what I like to sum it up, what we have here. You don't always need a library if you want to do reactive programming, if you want to work with these event streams. Have a look at what the JavaScript language is already providing to you. And so I can really recommend learn all the new stuff that's now coming up, also every year with each new JavaScript release. So that stuff that's coming for free into your browser. No need to download any kilobyte except in the browser install, right? But that's not your performance topic. The next thing is you can express these asynchronous flow here with these features. So you might want to integrate a little utility here and there for getting the events, merging them together. But when you later look into the repository, you can see that this from event function has only 1 line, I think, or 2. A map function also consists only of 3 lines of coding, so it's already there in the language. But what you also see is when you really want to do very complex interactions, very complex and special compositions of events, then you see that libraries like Rx have still some more utilities in their pocket. So if you want to impress someone, these async iterators are a pull-based event mechanism. I cannot impress someone now today. So it's only this pull-based interactions. Observables also have this hot-cold way of dealing with data. So there you have a few more options. But that, of course, comes then with a price. So I hope you enjoyed the talk. And I'll say thank you and have a great day.
Ja.